Hey collective, sorry for the delay with getting the next one out. It's Sin here. Today I have pulled the Chiron card, which is card number 28. And Chiron, the card has obviously the word heal on it, but Chiron is known as the wounded healer. So Chiron is where our deepest emotional and spiritual wounds reside. So it's a deep one, yeah? First, I want to start with the symbolism on the card. It has a snake on it. Now, remember, snakes symbolize transformation, symbolize the rebirth and healing, the transmutation of pain into power, things like that. Snakes tend to get a pretty bad rap because they bite. Well, so do we. So do lots of things that have teeth. And that they happen to have poison. But I think some people tend to forget that that doesn't make them bad, because a snake has poisonous fangs, but humans have weapons, right? Anyway, Chiron really wants us to look at how our wounding and our healing can be brought forth to be used as tools for healing collectively and within our communities and society at large. Chiron doesn't want us to get lost in our problems, but more be curious about them, be willing to face them, look at them, unpack them, so that we can learn lessons from them. Lessons, I don't know, but learn from them. I don't really like to say that bad things happen to us so that we can learn from them, because I just think sometimes bad things happen and there is no rhyme or reason to it, right? They just happen. Or they're set in motion by societal conditioning and things like that. But I think that there's things that they can teach us that will help us not let those wounds tell us we are undeserving or not worth it, or that things can't change for us. Like, just because that we have those wounds doesn't mean that we have to be stuck in those places, right? So it really wants us to look at them and say, well, okay, that happened, that hurts. Not denying the hurt, because hurt happens and hurt exists, and feeling hurt does not make us lesser humans, and it doesn't make anything wrong with us to experience pain and suffering. It is a human experience. So Chiron asks us what those wounds are telling us about ourselves, right? What those bigger societal wounds are telling us about society in general, our communities, our families, all of the systems, right? We don't necessarily need to be able to conceptualize why things have happened to us in order to use those things as a teacher for us, that we can then go out and use to teach others about certain things that we then have the lived experience and knowledge in. So Chiron wounds are generally not wounds that we are ever going to completely heal in our lifetime. Some of them run really, really deep, and they are wounds that will be a teacher for us our whole lives. And I guess Chiron just asks us to learn as we go so that we're not having to relearn the same stuff from it over and over again. That there will be, over our lifetime, the Chiron wounds will be able to mean that we can garner nuggets of wisdom from them, right? So then Chiron says, take those little nuggets of wisdom, they're things that we now know, and put them in our toolkit for how we can go out and use our own Chiron wounds to be wounded healers out in our communities. Yeah. Sometimes wounds that we face can seem absolutely impossible to heal, and maybe in some cases they are. I know for complex trauma survivors, it is a lifelong process of those wounds resurfacing and us needing to take from our toolkit that we've been building over a lifetime and apply that as the wounds become raw each time. Because those spots that Chiron will show us, they are sore spots. And I'm not going to say that healing them isn't going to hurt as much as the wounds themselves, if not more. Sometimes the healing of the wounds hurts more because it opens our eyes to the changes that we need to make in our lives in order to move and progress with that healing. And some of those changes are heartbreaking to make, and they're really hard to make. I mean, we have a choice, right? And we see this now on a global level, that when wounding happens, we have a choice on whether or not we are going to let that wound make us bitter or more compassionate. And I like to think that although sometimes bitterness comes out in me, I'm human, I take what's happened to me and try and apply it to be compassionate. For instance, you're not going to find Aboriginal communities here in this continent that are going to want to enact the same level of violence on settler colonialism that settler colonialism has inflicted upon us and our communities, right? You're not going to find Palestinians, including Hamas, that are going to want to inflict the same level of brutalism on the Israeli population that is being inflicted on the Palestinian population. Yes, there's resistance, there's fighting back by Hamas, and there are certain people in the world that seem to think that that's an even playing field. But we know that it's not. We know that when one side has all of the weapons, all of the advanced technology, when it's getting funding from the West, versus a population that are using homemade rockets and whatever they have on hand to resist, whether it's rocks or whatever, that's not an even playing field, right? So I'm not saying like that we wouldn't resist. Resistance is not the same as a brutal occupation, yeah? I guess, yeah, what I'm getting at is there is demographics in the world that were brutalized, usually by people that looked like them back in the day, that did become bitter and decide to be like those people that brutalized them, and then they traveled the world to brutalize. So Chiron's really asking us not to become bitter, but to become more compassionate, better humans that want transformative change and justice. Other things are right now, as of the 30th of May, Chiron and Mars are now conjunct in Aries, and that's really interesting planetary energy, because Mars is the planet of action, energy, and assertiveness, and then you have it coming and meeting with the wounded healer. So it becomes a really powerful time for us to address these wounds, both interpersonally and at a systemic level, right? In our family systems, communities, society at large. To be more specific with where you interpersonally need to work with Chiron, it's important to know where Chiron falls within your natal chart. So for myself personally, my Chiron sits in Taurus. Taurus sits in my third house in my natal chart. So Chiron in Taurus represents wounds around stability, security, material possessions, and siblings. And then being in my third house, it represents that I have grown up and often felt misunderstood, and had trouble expressing myself within my sibling dynamics. So for me, it's been really insightful to understand why it is that I have such difficult connections with my siblings. I've understood stuff from a psychological level about ages we all were as significant things happened within our family. Understood it at a more spiritual level by comparing our natal charts and seeing like where we do clash and see the world in a very different way, which has helped me understand, I guess, why I have been so misunderstood by the people that I grew up with. within my family system, I've always struggled to be seen as someone whose opinion and experience was seen as valid. I was the youngest in the family, not just in my own nuclear family system, but I'm the youngest grandchild on both sides of the family. So perpetually the baby, right? Who had a baby at 16. So in the psyche of my family, I am still a child parent who doesn't know the best way to parent, who doesn't know anything as much as they know. And so I was consistently having my own intuitive parenting skills undermined by what I now can really identify as the colony's idea of parenting skills. I also definitely materially, throughout my life, there's been definite wounding around material stuff. So as a kid, I've touched on this before, that my mum was narcissistic, and her idea of showing love was materially, and I have rejected that a lot since I was a kid. So that was probably my first wound in this life materially. Intergenerationally, materially, the scarcity wound comes from the act of colonization, right? Taking abundance from my ancestors and switching it with scarcity. I've then gone on into my adulthood to own a house, be financially abused, and lose my house. And that created a wound in me where I definitely lost security, right? Which is another one of my Chiron wounds. Because housing security is really important, especially when you're a parent, a single parent. You want to make sure that you can provide for your kids, and that definitely created a challenge for me. What else? Stability. Stability has always been very hard for me to grasp. Even in a marriage, I wasn't stable within that marriage because the marriage itself was not stable. As a parent, I wasn't stable because my parenting was constantly being undermined. As just a human within this colonial society, my stability is constantly being challenged, along with my self-worth. Self-worth has been a lifelong thing, like from having a narcissistic mother, then having the issues I have with my siblings and feeling like I don't belong. Never been really able to form a group of friends. I have like these friends all over the place. They're all singular, because I never felt like I belonged in the first group I was in, my family of origin. Anyway, I think it's really important if you want to capitalize on this energy of Mars and Chiron being conjunct, to find out where Chiron sits in your natal chart and find out where these wounds are most prominent for you. You may have an idea, but you may be completely caught off guard by some of the stuff that you learn about yourself from your Chiron placement. Chiron is definitely a deep dive. I mean, isn't all healing, but it's really looking at those intergenerational wounds too. So look, for any non-Indigenous people that are watching this, I say this with love because I want transformational change. Don't just look at what has happened to you when you're doing your Chiron healing. Look at what ancestral wounding has done to others and what you need to heal in those places. True anti-colonial work for settler colonial communities is in healing those Chiron wounds that have made you, your ancestors, and be honest with yourself, you in ways, bitter and entitled. And how the continuation of the intergenerational patterns within your communities continues to create wounding within our communities. You may think that you don't contribute to ongoing colonization of Indigenous lands. But the reality is, while systems of colonization are supported on our lands, all settlers are contributing to the ongoing colonization of our peoples and the ongoing subjugation of themselves as well, because you are having to deny whole aspects of who you are. Your families are denying whole aspects of who they are and how they've come to be, to maintain a level of settler comfort that needs to be shaken. So let's use this time while Mars and Chiron are hanging out with each other to really, really look at this stuff.